Sir Edward Leigh.
The Honourable Gentleman for Aberarvon attacks us for being the party of low growth, but this is a party which has presided over a situation where we have more people in employment than ever before. And unbelievably, the number of vacancies are actually more than those who are unemployed. But he is right, and this is why I'm going to follow the Honourable Gentleman for Aberarvon, to focus laser-like on what we are told to talk about today, although we are allowed to stray a bit during this Queen's Speech debate, and that's what the British people care about, and that is achieving economic growth. So in time, we can have an interesting debate about Channel 4 privatisation, about foie gras, and about conversion therapy. But these are not the overwhelming priorities of the British people at the moment. What they are concerned about is the cost of living crisis. Now, there's never been an easier opportunity for the opposition to attack the government in terms of broad economic statistics. But of course that ignores the fact that at the time the last general election took place, we couldn't possibly have predicted the impact of a global pandemic or, unbelievably, war in Europe as a result of the cruel tyrant Putin trying to recreate an old-style empire. So the government, no government, I would argue, since the Second World War has faced greater challenges, and I would contend that generally the opposition has failed to provide any substantial alternative policies which would have greatly alleviated the situation with regard to the war in Ukraine or the pandemic. Now, I am going to hold the government to account, however. I want to hold them to account on the tax burden. I think, given that families are suffering and people are lying awake at night desperately searching how they pay bills, we are in such a crisis that we have to move in a far more radical direction on the overall tax burden. This is a question I put to the Chancellor of Exchequer yesterday in Treasury Questions, and I was quite pleased with his response when I urged this to be a priority. We are now facing the heaviest tax burden since the 1940s. Freezing income tax thresholds combined with more inflation will push many people into higher tax thresholds. As Paul Johnson of the Institute of Fiscal Studies said, almost all workers will be paying more tax on their earnings in 2025 than they would have been paying without this Parliament's reforms to income tax and NICs. The rise in inflation is projected to spark the biggest decline in living standards in any single financial year. So I do follow the Honourable Gentleman for Aberarvon in calling for radical policies. I'm not against a windfall tax, but I'm not sure on its own, if you divide its receipts around every household in Britain, it's going to make a great deal of difference. And frankly, the Chancellor has to come back to this House in time for the budget, or preferably before, and have a cut in the overall tax burden. The next thing I want to talk about is the housing crisis. If we're going to kickstart the economy, if we're going to help our young people get into housing, we just simply have to build much more housing. The number of dwellings where, according to building control figures, building work was started on site was 41,600 in October to December 2021. And that was a 3% decrease when compared to the previous quarter, a 3% decrease when compared to the same quarter of the previous year. The number of dwellings completed was 41,330 in October to December 2021, a 4% decrease when compared to previous quarters, an 11% decrease when compared to the same quarter a year before. The fact is, this is a crisis, and what I do welcome in the Queen's Speech is the government is honestly attempting to find some way through planning controls to try and get the housing we need. But we have to have a sort of similar effort that we had after the Second World War, where Harold Macmillan was building 300,000 council houses every year. We have to really see this as an absolute and complete priority. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is that there's no point in building more housing, and this is a crisis we need to address. There's no point cutting taxes if at the same time immigration is out of control. And the government really has to understand that we simply cannot replace mass immigration from the EU with mass immigration from the rest of the world. And that's why these channel crossings are so totemic, and that's why the Home Secretary is right to try and address them, for all that's controversial. Last week, on the 9th to the 15th of May, 607 migrants detected across 25 boats in the Channel. The week before, 2nd to 8th of May, 792 migrants, 30 boats. The week before that, 25th of April, the 1st of May, 254 migrants, 7 boats. This cannot go on. We have to build the houses, we have to control migration, we have to cut taxes, we have to kickstart the economy. And the very last thing I want to say, although there's been great criticism of the government over the protocol, we have to unite this United Kingdom. We cannot have a situation where there is no proper government in Northern Ireland. The fact is the DUP are not going to come back into government unless we deal with the protocol. Of course we want to, and I say this to the honourable gentleman for Reigate, of course we want to respect international law. We have to sort this out. So these issues that we're now facing are really urgent, really important, and I just urge the government to have and I'm sure they are listening, to address them in the sort of dramatic way that we were trying to address issues following a world war, because the effects of the pandemic and the effects of the war in Ukraine are so grave that we should all unite together with a sense of compassion to help the people who are suffering now under this level of inflation, on this level of rising costs, and on this level of rising taxation.